So, Bridie, we're going to get into your career as a commentator. What actually made you want to get into this?
It feels like a natural progression, I think, for a lot of athletes because they've spent a long time in their head, noticing what's happening in the sport that they've competed in. And so to then talk about it out loud, it's probably, for me, it was a natural progression. I think, though, that the intermediate step was that when I was racing overseas, first for the national team and then for professional cycling teams, I started blogging about my races, so writing race reports. Part of it was almost like a dispatch for my family back home in Australia, just to let them know. I would publish them on my website. But also, it was a bit of a dig at the fact that no one was covering women's cycling. So I wouldn't just write about me in the race. I'd actually give a race report. And I became, then those things would get circulated around to a lot of people. And then when the Beijing 2008 Olympics were on and London 2012 Olympics were on, Twitter was big then and cycling was talked about a lot on Twitter. So I live tweeted both those races, even though there were commentators on the networks covering the women's road race. My extra comments and observations ended up being retweeted and watched by hundreds of thousands of people for Beijing and London for the road races. So I kind of really started to be able to amplify the performances of the women who were racing in the professional peloton to the cycling community, and I really got into it.
Did you expect that kind of reaction when you were starting to share your opinion on different races and that kind of thing?
I think it confirms the suspicions that most advocates of professional women's sport have, which is when the sport is great and the competition is fierce, people want to see it, regardless of
Mm.
gender and regardless of sport. I mean, if we think about the Olympics, we will watch, show jumping or diving or the sports that we don't have a lot of knowledge in because the commentators are fantastic and because the athletes are in the prime of their lives doing something extraordinary. So whatever you're watching, if the commentator is bringing you in to the knowledge of that sport, and the athlete is there looking physically incredible and performing things that you could never do while you sit on the couch eating nachos, then it's an amazing and inspiring and fabulous thing to observe. So I wasn't surprised, but I think we still heard that narrative all the way up past 2019 when the United States won the FIFA Women's World Cup in that amazing grand final match in the Stade de Paris in France. And, Megan Rapinoe had her arms outstretched and the crowd was chanting equal pay, because they discovered that the US men's national team was being paid more than the women, even though the women had won 3 medals in FIFA World Cup. So I think it's taken a long time for the broad community to start to notice that, in fact, gender inequality still exists in sport.
Mm.
And we saw that, of course, on stage when Spain won the FIFA Women's World Cup here in Australia and the team director and coach, sexually harassed and assaulted the players. I was actually still surprised that people were so shocked about that
Yeah,
because you
right.
think, of course, athletes are exploited, unfortunately, regardless of their gender, and people in positions of power will frequently try to use that power against high profile people. So none of that was a surprise to me, but it did seem to blow people away.
So you think the culture still needs to shift a little within behind closed doors, or?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just about some of those more sinister elements, fears of financial abuse or sexual abuse or bullying, etc. And again, these happen in men's professional sports as well. But there are certainly some parts of our industry of professional cycling that are a long way behind. And we see it also in some of the medico legal aspects in supporting cyclists. There's this long held narrative that cyclists are very tough. And trust me, they are. And people like putting memes up of, soccer players rolling around on the ground with a torn ankle and a cyclist who's run into a tree or hit the ground and is bleeding and they're continuing to ride on in the Tour de France. Part of that is because of regulations. You can't get on the bench during a bike race and have a timeout and then get back into the race. And in the Tour de France, you can't take a day off and then come back in and finish. You have to complete every single stage. So the event and the rules are set up that you actually can't withdraw and then change your mind. So cyclists have had to historically push on. But if we think about concussion protocols, it's taken up until only the last 2 years for the professional peloton to have a meaningful concussion protocol, and it's not always even implemented. So if I was to fall off my bike, seem a bit dizzy and stand around next to it, the reaction from most of my teammates and probably the team director would be, quickly, get back on your bike, keep riding.
Yeah, right.
And, so changing that narrative, let alone trying to get women to get paid and to have equal promotion and have broadcast deals that are the same or contracts that are the same, there's still some way to go.